To agenda item number 9, 2015 legislative session update and commission bill positions. Myself and Ms. Jolly will be taking over on this item for possible action. Staff will present a status update, track legislation since the last commission meeting. The commission may consider any additional legislative positions or action. At this point, everyone should have a handout in front of them. Just to remind folks what our positions are on different bills that we addressed in April. To be honest, we're so late in the process at this point, I don't know that there's a lot we can do in terms of changing positions with the exception of one bill. All the bills that are dead because they didn't meet legislative deadlines essentially have been taken off the tracking list. There are extra copies in the back for folks, and I think there's a copy in Vegas and Elko in the public as well. So what I'll do is I'll kind of step through this and ask Kim to maybe help me with any questions that I run across, let you know where we're at, and then I will actually have Chief Turnipseed come up and talk to us about AB 142, because that's the one bill that's kind of in play right now that could have some pretty significant ramifications for the commission and the department. So in terms of AB 35, that's the vessel ID compliance bill. That's been approved. That was a department-sponsored bill, actually got done early in the session. AB 78 started out as the NDOW bill regarding elk fee and authorizing the commission to raise that fee from $5 to $10. It had been substantially amended as of when we met in April, and essentially the amendments took the elk fee out, talked specifically about some of the issues, not the issues, but the commission-cab relationship, and clarified that the cabs can meet at every single meeting or prior to every one of our meetings rather than just quota and season setting meetings. Provided some direction to us in terms of writing a written explanation when we denied a season or quota recommendation from a cab. And then the other big piece of it that we touched on a little bit this morning is that it dictated the $3 predator fee. 80% of that funding had to go towards lethal projects. We had to take input from the park committee. At one point in the progression, I think when we last looked at it, it had the commission actually approving the plan instead of developing that plan with guidance. Essentially what AB 78 ended up as is very similar to what we reviewed last time. There was a conference committee on Thursday morning at 7:15 with 3 members of the Senate and 3 members of the Assembly. And essentially it passed out as this commission reviewed it. I did have an opportunity to talk with members from both houses that were on the conference committee and express our concerns or our inputs on that bill and the commission's position that we took last time. I think some of those changes were incorporated and 2 of them were not. In terms of what the 80% calculation was based off of, and in terms of the explanations back to the cabs being either at the meeting or in writing, that stayed the same. The commission guidance language actually got put back in. Essentially, there was a concern with diversion if the department wasn't approving the funding, and so essentially that language now is the same. And the department will be approving the plan under our guidance and with recommendations from the commission as well as recommendations from the park committee. So I think that gives you a thumbnail sketch of where AB 78 is. I don't believe the conference committee report is available. It just happened yesterday morning, so we don't have specific language. In my opinion, I think our inputs still stand. My recommendation would be not to move or change anything at this point. Any questions on AB 78? AB 82 was an NDOW fiscal bill, a cleanup bill that was approved by the governor in April. AB 136 had to do with carrying a firearm during muzzleloader archery season and making accommodations for disabled hunters in taking hunter safety class. The bill actually came over to the Senate and we provided our commission position on the bill. They actually cleaned it up a little bit, and now it's very clear that you can carry a handgun with a barrel no longer than 8 inches and without a scope in the field during archery and muzzleloader seasons. The accommodations for disabled sportsmen and taking hunter safety is still in place. And per our general platform, they are able to incorporate an amendment that will allow this commission to provide regulations that a chaperone of a locally impaired hunter can actually have someone kill and retrieve a big game animal. And so that might be something, if it passes in its current form, that would come back to us for regulation. Questions on 136? As of now, I think they're working out the amendment. It has not come out to the Senate floor yet. So once it comes off the Senate floor, it will go back to the Assembly. But I will relay that the sponsor of the bill was very happy that we were willing to work with them on coming out with kind of a good product and being proactive in that manner. So AB 142, I'm going to skip over at this time. And we'll come back to that. AB 217 had to do with registration of off-highway vehicles. We had a general platform on that to support continuation of the registration and any amendments to improve efficiency and use of the registration program. It is an exempt bill and it's in Ways and Means. And to be honest, I haven't tracked this all that closely. So Kim, I don't know if you had any further update on 217.
Kim Jolly for the record, management analyst with the director's office, AB 217 does have the, I guess it would be the second reprint available, and it's a lot easier to understand than what we saw before. And it does maintain registration of OHVs, but it does have an exemption for large OHVs, like the 4-person OHVs and mini trucks. And then there's kind of a helmet, not being required to wear a helmet for certain types of vehicles. I think it's the mini trucks if they're on an OHV or if they're on a off-highway road. So the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers are supportive of that version, and like you said, it's exempt. So.
AB 408 is the next one on our docket, and I don't think we've actually reviewed this, and we have no position. It has to do with law enforcement authority. I think it's federal law enforcement authority on public lands. AGR 2 was a resolution in support of increasing raven depredation. That's already been passed and is at the Secretary of State. SB 4 was Senator Settlemeyer's bill originally to clean up, making sure there was an exemption on traps set on private property from registration requirements. It had since been amended to include making trap registration voluntary rather than mandatory, and also sent authority over shed antlers to the various county commissions. We had opposed those provisions, supported the original bill that came out of the Senate with the private property exemption for trap registration. And if you'll remember, we were split on the trap registration portion. This has been on the chief clerk's desk in the Assembly, which basically means it's sitting there doing nothing. I've heard rumors that it might move, but to this point, as far as I know, it's still on the chief clerk's desk with no changes to what we had reviewed in April. Any questions on any of those so far? SB 41 was the NDOW-E duck stamp. It was approved by the governor on April 7th, and Director Wasley, did you have an update on that?
I do have an update that will be provided in the Department Activity Report.
Sounds good. So footnote that. We've got some good news. They actually came out of getting that passed quickly. SB 163 creates the Council on Nevada Wildlife Conservation Education within the Department of Wildlife. That bill is exempt, and I think Ms. Jolly actually just told me that there will be a Senate Finance hearing on that this evening at 6:30.
6 o'clock in Senate Finance in room 2134. It's first on the agenda, so that's good.
And as far as the amendments, my understanding is that the department has worked to clarify any possibility of a diversion. Mr. Wasley or Patrick, I don't know if you wanted to address anything on that, but it's my understanding that the version that's going to be heard is very similar to what we looked at last time, except there's been some minor adjustments to make sure there's not an issue with the version. Am I speaking correctly to that?
For the record, Patrick Cates, that is correct. The Sportsman's Coalition asked for, through Senator Reed's office, asked for a formal letter from the feds about whether or not the bill constituted diversion. As previously written, the feds did write a letter to that effect, and we worked together and worked on compromise language that addresses all those concerns.
Thank you. Any questions on that one? Again, we kind of had a broad platform, and I don't think anything would necessarily change the platform at this point. SB 417 prohibited the use of data to harass or take mammals, game birds, or other wildlife. This was in relation to satellite GPS collars, telemetry collars, and survey data, and that actually has already been delivered to the governor, so it was a late bill in getting introduced and ended up sailing through the process very quickly. SGR 1 urges Congress to enact legislation transferring federal lands to the state. I believe that has passed out of committee in the Assembly and will be on the Assembly floor. Again, I don't think there's been any amendments that would result in us needing to change any sort of position. SGR 5 expresses support of the 2014 Greater Sage Grouse Conservation Plan and not to list the greater sage grouse as endangered. This also cleared committee in the Assembly, I believe.
Right, for the record, the second reading means the second reading of the Assembly floor.
So SGR 1 and SGR 5 are in the same position without substantial changes, as I understand it. And then SGR 11, the proposed constitutional amendment to preserve the right to hunt, trap, and fish in the state, actually has been passed and enrolled and delivered to the Secretary of State since our last meeting. So, are there any questions on the bills that I just went through, or any requests to change anything at this point? My recommendation would be this late in the game to leave those positions in place at this point. I think we've been pretty clear. Any discussion by the commission? Okay, what I'll do is I'm going to take it out to public comment on that portion of what we've gone over, just in case there is any, and then we'll bring it back and step through 142. So at this point, is there any public comment on the bills that are on the spreadsheet or tab comment that we just went through, with the exception of AB 142? Dr. Lamb?
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I just had a comment. You said that you contacted the members on AB 78 on both sides on the conference committee, and I was curious if you represent this commission, spoke for the commission, because I don't think it's legal for you to represent the commission at violation of meeting law without having a public hearing on it. Who did you represent on that? Yourself or the commission? I think
I'll address that when we bring it back.
if you represent the commission, I don't think that was right, because we would like to comment on it too.
Additional public comment? Reno? No? Las Vegas, public comment?
No, Chairman, no public comment. Thank you.
Public comment in Elko?
No comment in Elko.
Okay. We'll bring it back to the commission to address the fact that potentially I have been misrepresenting the commission. I think in my testimony and discussions and talking with folks, I have made it clear when I'm representing the commission and when I'm representing myself. And when I represent the commission, what I am bound by representing are those positions and or platforms that are on this spreadsheet that we have talked about. And I've done everything in my power to ensure that when we have those discussions, I represent whether I'm talking on behalf of myself or on behalf of the commission's position. And so, outside of clarifying it more than that, that's where I'll leave it. So with that, what I would like to do is moved to AB 142. If you'll recall, the last time we looked at AB 142, what we had was a bill that had passed out of the assembly that had essentially taken our demerit system and put it into NRS. There was another part in there that talked about hunter education cards and the removal of demerits. If you had not necessarily taken the class, but had a hunter safety card, and you presented it to the department, essentially you could take 4 demerits off. We did have a commission position in opposition to this. There was a late amendment. This came up for work session late Thursday afternoon. The amendment, I believe, was 24 pages in length, and had a lot of different moving parts and pieces in it. I did, on my own behalf, and I clarified this in the work session, offer an amendment in regards to the hunter safety class, which will allow a person to take hunter safety after accumulating 6 demerits in order to remove 4, and then it would only allow you to do that once in a lifetime versus simply showing up with hunter education card and taking 4 demerits off. Again, I was given the opportunity to speak in the work session, and I made it abundantly clear that that was my personal amendment, that was not the position of this commission. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, there were a lot of other provisions that we didn't have the opportunity to review until, like I said, about an hour before the hearing. I was able to advance my 2 cents and my personal view on the different provisions of the bill. But this is still in play in the legislature. We don't have the version that potentially is being discussed today in front of us, but I did ask Mr. Turnipseed if he could just step us through all of the provisions, at least conceptually, that were discussed in AB 142 as of yesterday. So, Mr. Turnipseed, I'll turn it over to you to step through those provisions for us.
Thank you, Chairman Drew and members of the commission. Tyler Turnipseed, Chief Game Warden for the record, the Department of Wildlife. As you said, Chairman Drew, this amendment that came yesterday, or series of amendments that came yesterday from Assemblyman Hansen were far beyond anything that the original bill ever talked about. Didn't have a chance to look at those much before the work session yesterday, but in the last 24 hours I've given it a look, and then looked at this morning's mock-up of it from LCB that tried to clarify it further. So the bill sort of bounces all over the place now. I'll just have to go through it section by section to let you know what I think each section does, what each amendment does, and why a lot of them are very damaging in my opinion. So section 1.15 of the bill is interesting language I've never seen before. It's very broad. It essentially says that a person cannot be found in violation of any wildlife law in any of our statutes unless he or she is proven to have knowingly and intentionally violated the law. Mr. Hansen made some points about how wildlife laws shouldn't be a criminal act. It should be some other legal term that I wasn't familiar with. Essentially places the burden of proof on us to prove that a person knew the law and then still violated it. It would make it impossible to prosecute most of the violations we come across. Section 1.9 of the bill would increase from 4 to 6 the number of demerits that a person could remove from their accumulated total by taking the hunter education class. This would be a significant expansion of that loophole. We do, however, support the amendment that Chairman Drew mentioned a minute ago about tightening that up to where a person can only take that once in their lifetime to reduce their demerits. As it's currently written in statute, a person could take that class to reduce 4 demerits rather than 6, and it would be allowed once in any 60-month period. So as you guys know from one of the cases that you've heard in recent years, there have been instances where people continue to take that class as a get-out-of-jail-free card to reduce their mistakes. Section 1.9, subsection 7 would limit the length of a license revocation to only 3 years. As it stands right now, the department and the commission can revoke a person for 2 to 3 years on a misdemeanor, 5 years on a gross misdemeanor, and 10 on a felony. And this would limit that to 3 years. And that includes, I believe that would also include the authority of judges and courts to revoke for more than 3 years. I think it limits not only our authority, but the court's authority. In my opinion, a 3-year license revocation is certainly not sufficient for big game poaching when someone kills an animal without a tag or out of season. Section 2, subsections 4 and 6 of the bill would reduce penalties for killing a mountain lion illegally from a felony to a misdemeanor. That's been in the bill for a while now. That's not new language. Section 2, subsection 7 speaks about 5 and 10-year revocations, which in my mind completely conflicts with section 1.9 that limits the revocations to 3 years, and subsection 7. It's also problematic in that it takes the revocation authority away from the commission and the department and leaves it with the courts. In my mind, this is totally counter to one of the reasons that Mr. Hansen first brought about the need for a demerit system 20 years ago, in that his contention was we needed to take out some of the subjectivity and inconsistency from different court jurisdictions around the state, in which a court in Jackpot may hammer someone for one violation and a court in Tonopah lets them go with a slap on the wrist for that same violation. In my mind, that was sort of the intention of the demerit system, to make that consistent in each jurisdiction regardless of the local feelings on that particular law in a given area. Section 3, subsection 6 of the bill would take away the department's authority to revoke a person's privileges when they fail to pay their civil penalty after a wildlife conviction. Similarly, section 4 of the bill would take away department authority to revoke a person's privileges when that person fails to appear in court on charges for wildlife crime or fails to pay their ticket. As it is now, if somebody fails to appear or they don't pay their ticket, not only does the court issue a warrant for their arrest, but we can also revoke their privileges, and that subsection would take away our authority to do so. Section 5 of the bill states that a person's license privileges may not be revoked for a period of more than 3 years again. Section 6 of the bill, again, speaks to 5 and 10-year revocations in conflict with the section right before it. Section 9.5 of the bill would take away the authority of the commission to regulate the collection of shed antlers. This is the one that you just mentioned, had been put in a couple other bills that failed or were about to fail. So took it out of those bills apparently and put it in this one. Essentially, it authorizes the commission to make regulations for the commercial collection of shed antlers. As you guys well know from the testimony over the last 2 years, we have no way to differentiate which person is a commercial shed antler collector and which is a non-commercial. They don't wear name tags on the back that say that when they're out on the mountain. As you know, an antler collector doesn't become commercial until months down the road when the antler buyer comes through town and they sell their stack of antlers. So essentially unenforceable if it's limited to commercial, and it kind of ignores the biological concern that you guys have talked about displacing big game animals from off their crucial winter range habitat at a time when they're vulnerable, if it ever snows again. Section 13 of the bill places the demerit schedule into NRS rather than NAC, and in doing so greatly reduces many of those actual demerit numbers. There was testimony from Assemblyman Hansen yesterday that it didn't reduce very many of them. When you go through and count, there are actually 21 different wildlife crimes that the demerits would be reduced for. Section 14.5 of the bill would completely repeal the entire statute that deals with trap registration. As you guys know, this law and the regulations that you've dealt with that go hand in hand with the law have been in place since 1979, and especially sorted out in the last 2 years, including the 2013 session and all the work that this board and the subcommittees did in regards to trap registration. That section of the bill would completely eliminate that whole statute from NRS to where there would be no such thing as any provision for trap registration. That would be completely gone. Section 15 of the bill would cause the demerit schedule in statute to expire once the Wildlife Commission readopts a new demerit schedule into NAC and it's then approved at the Legislative Commission. Essentially what Assemblyman Hansen is proposing there is that he wants to roll back the demerit numbers, put them in statute, and then once this board has reheard testimony on the demerit schedule and accepted a new demerit schedule, and then that got approved at the Legislative Commission, which he sits on, and blocked your last several regulations. Only then would the demerit schedule come out of NRS and go back to NAC. So that was a lot to digest in a short amount of time, but that's kind of what the bill does now. It bounces all over in the different chapters and essentially is just a whole-scale weakening of our ability to prosecute wildlife crime. Any questions?
Just to follow up with Chief Turnipseed, in my ability to review that much of a bill in about 2 hours yesterday, I think his breakdown is very much what was discussed yesterday in the work session. And again, the work session document is a bit confusing, but it is posted on the legislative website through Nellis under Assembly Bill 142. I know you guys haven't had the luxury of looking at that language. The fact that there is potentially a short committee meeting today and things may be subject to change, I felt that maybe the conceptual breakdown and discussion of the bill was more appropriate, as that language could change even real time as we're discussing it here today. But I think in general, the commission can probably understand why I had some pretty significant personal concerns over the bill and the various provisions. But I wanted everyone to have an understanding of what conceptually was being proposed, and if this commission is comfortable moving forward with at least developing a broad platform opposed to those various provisions, that's something that I would certainly suggest and be happy to carry forward as we move through the process. If it does in fact pass out of committee today, it would go to the Senate floor. Obviously, there's been some changes in the event that it passes the Senate floor. It would go to Assembly for concurrence. If they don't concur, it would go to a conference committee. So potentially this is a long ways from being done. It does give us an opportunity to at least adopt a platform if we'd like to. To be honest, there's probably, if we had 6 months to work on it, an opportunity to look at developing some things that maybe work. But at this late point in the game, I'm not so sure we have time to fix all the things that I personally would have concerns on or address all the sections that Mr. Turnipseed just presented. So, questions?
So, Mr. Chair, you're recommending that we already oppose the bill, but what you're recommending is that we be more specific in terms of the conceptual issues that have been brought to our attention?
I think what we opposed is the version of the bill that came out of the Assembly. And I guess my proposal is, because all we have really to go off of is a conceptual amendment, is to adopt a platform in opposition of that conceptual amendment as it was described to us today, rather than trying to step through it page by page, section by section, because we don't have the language in front of us.
But can't we, I mean, I'm just asking this question, and I'll leave it up to other people too. I mean, cannot we indicate that by making these changes that they're so substantial that they're basically going to break the current demerit system, which obviously is what he wants to accomplish? I understand that, but I mean, can we, you know, I think if we go through this point by point, my concern would be that we lend credibility to something that doesn't have any credibility. And I'm just wondering how we could talk about the bill in totality. In other words, we really don't want the bill to pass, and that it's not something that we can amend. I mean, I guess that's the question, is trying to make amendments to what has already been amended is going to be extremely difficult for us to do.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. I think it'd be easier just to make a broad platform on the conceptual amendments. I don't think, without having the language in front of us, we can step through point by point.
And if I could add to that, Mr. Chairman, Tyler Turnipseed again for the record. As you pointed out, and to the rest of the commission members, a lot of this has changed so much just in the last 24 hours is why we haven't been able to provide this on paper for you. In fact, for 3 hours this morning, I sat in the back row there and typed up these bullet points as I read through the bill. So I haven't even had a chance to print them for myself yet. So I guess that's, you know, this version of the bill is so much different from the way it was yesterday or a week ago or a month ago on anything that you've probably heard before on it. One thing that I did point out that maybe I would just add in closing, I think we discussed it at the subcommittee level, but there's been a thought presented in some of these hearings that our demerit system is too harsh, too heavy-handed, punishes too many innocent sportsmen. So I had Joanne put some of the numbers together for me, which, by the way, speaking of her 30 years of service, she knows how to do every part of this job that I don't. But on average, for the last 20 years, we sell approximately 190,000 licenses every year. We revoke, on average, about 14 people's license privileges per year. If you do that math, it comes out to 99.999925% of licenses sold do not result in license revocation. Basically 0.00075 license revocations per license sold. I think it would be hard for anybody to contend that this system is unfairly punishing anyone with those numbers in mind.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I guess the issue that this is a problem. I'm trying to be, I know this is on the record, so I'm trying to be very careful about how to say this. It appears that we're not going to have the votes to stop it at the committee level. Would you?
For all I know, that bill has already passed the committee today,
All right, so,
potentially.
so then the next thing, so it's going to go to the Senate floor.
Correct.
So it seems to me that, we probably need to take fairly aggressive action as a commission, possibly writing a letter, conceptually indicating our concerns to every senator. And I don't know if we've ever done that, but maybe that's what and pointing out this, I think this is a really critical point that's just been made. That if there are people who say that this is yada, 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 but if you look at it in terms of, the actual number of licenses that are issued, this is what it is. And if there's still that feeling, then give us the opportunity to try to deal with this, not on a minute-by-minute basis, or something to that effect.
Right, and I think we're probably saying the same thing in a different way. Again, and maybe Mr. Ward, you could address this, just knowing how we've listed it and what our latitude is, but I think a general platform a platform in opposition to the conceptual amendment that is before us today, as we understand it, the commission would be opposed to that and generally opposed to any subsequent changes that weaken the current demerit schedule. We could adopt something like that, and I think it's broad enough that it gives us some leeway to address the issues. Is that something that you feel we could do under the way this is agendized?
For the record, Harry Ward, Deputy Attorney General. Yes, I believe that would fit within the agenda, and I don't think that would be a problem.
Okay. Additional questions for Chief Turnipseed? Any discussion by the commission before I take it out for public comment? Okay. This wasn't on our agenda, obviously, so I'm not going to break out county advisory boards because obviously you guys haven't seen this. But public comment at this point, specific to AB 142 and the discussion we've just had? Hi, today. Public comment in Las Vegas.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we have comment.
Mr. Chair, this is Jana Wright. I would encourage the commission to adamantly oppose AB 142 entirely. There's so many parts of it that are disgusting that I don't know what you're planning on doing, really. I'm not tracking but definitely as chairman, I hope that you would contact the Senate Majority Leader and Minority Leader and explain how terrible this bill is.
Now it undermines Endo.
Thank you.
Do you want to say something?
Additional public comment in Las Vegas?
Yes, this is Stephanie Myers, Mount Charleston. It really undermines NDOW's authority, and it undermines your authority, so it seems that it would be ripe for more aggressive action on the Commission's part. Thank you.
Public comment in Elko?
No comment in Elko.
Okay. I think we may have missed one in Reno.
I was late. Mr. Chairman, Donald Reno. I guess you have to be careful who you vote for. I'm not in Assemblyman Hansen's district. I certainly agree with your posture on this bill. Our side is also working on this issue. I do think it's important to take all the administrative steps that you can to register your concerns about this bill, because ultimately, your boss, the governor, I presume, will have some opportunity to sign this or not sign it. And I would hope that, should it go that far, you might be able to convince the governor not to sign the bill based upon all the administrative steps having been followed carefully and your views registered specifically all along the line. So, worst case, I think that's a go.
Okay, next public comment, Reno.
Yes, for the record, Fred Volz, I think you need to take a much starker approach in terms of framing this issue, whomever you're going to be speaking to in the legislature. And the way that I would propose doing that is to indicate, do you believe in the state police or the National Guard or the county sheriff or the city police? Because if you do, then completely eviscerating the law enforcement aspect of NDOW and the commission makes no sense at all, and you're essentially going to have rogue people out there doing all sorts of things that are not in the public interest. Thank you.
Additional public comment, Reno? Last call. Okay, bring it back to the commission. Discussion, questions? If not, I'm willing to entertain a motion.
I would just say, comment, at the risk of sounding redundant, risk of I might receive another letter. The notion that you're going to create ignorance of the law as a defense basically rewrites, I don't know how many one of those basic tenets in criminal law, a statute that says you only violate the law if you intentionally or knowingly break it. Means you engage in the conduct knowingly or intentionally, not that you had to be aware of the actual law on the books and violate it in that manner. But if the intent of this bill is to go that far, I mean, it's a dramatic step in the American criminal law system. So I think I share the sentiments with everybody that's been expressed. This is going too far, especially when you hear the numbers and the justification that it's too draconian of the system. We're talking about 14 license revocations a year. That doesn't seem draconian to me. Doesn't even come close.
Additional comments?
Mr. Chairman, I'd go a little bit further, Brad. I know you're a lawyer and I'm not, but I worked around the law a long time. I think it's unconstitutional because it denigrates the rights of those that have had laws violated on them. You can't discriminate on that point based on whether it's intentional or not. There are the elements of a crime, and if the elements are met, you've broken the law. And that's the way I've always been taught in making an arrest, putting in for a warrant for arrest to take forward to a magistrate. And there's just no way that this thing would ever pass constitutional muster, in my opinion. I'd be interested to know what the LCB said about this particular law. Do you recall, Jeremy?
But I know the question was raised in work session yesterday because several of the committee members had some question and confusion in terms of what that language specifically meant. And legal also indicated that they had some concern, and one of the directions that they got in terms of new language that may have come out today that, again, we don't necessarily have access to at this point, is trying to clean that up. And there was even some questions around what the true intent of that language was and whether it met the intent. And so my guess is some of that may have changed. Some of my personal consternation with it was rolling back the merits. I think that the comment made by the assemblyman in presentation was that we're going to roll the demerits back with some minor changes to what they were in 1999. I guess my personal take on that was I'm not so comfortable undoing all the hard work of the commissions and the cabs and the public process that has been unveiled over the last 16 years just out of respect for those people and for our system. Personally, I'm adamantly opposed to the bill, and I think I made that abundantly clear yesterday in my testimony. But as Mr. Lent points out, I can't convey that position being from the commission unless I have some sort of platform or background. And so my intent today on letting you guys know what was going on with the bill was to give you an opportunity to develop a platform or a position, and I would be glad to relay that. But at this point, I don't have it simply because the last opportunity we had to look at this is the version that came out of the assembly. So yesterday when I got up, I said, all I can say on behalf of the commission is that we're neutral because we haven't seen this and we haven't discussed a lot of the provisions. And then the rest of the comments from there were essentially from me on my own behalf. So that's my question to you guys today. I've done as much as I can to give you the detail of what was kind of unveiled yesterday. And I guess as the chairman and kind of the defunct spokesman, not defunct, but de facto spokesman for the group, I'm happy to take forward a message. I just need you guys to give me some guidance on what message that needs to be.
I have one further comment, Mr. Chairman. I think it's very important to put it on the record. This discussion of rolling back demerit points has come up in prior meetings when we addressed legislative bills. I don't think I have heard from one cab. I'm not so certain I've heard from one sportsman come forward to either the legislative committee or to this commission saying that this is a draconian system that needs to be fixed, or that there's a problem with the current demerit system. I don't think I've heard that. I may be wrong, I could go back, but I don't think we've heard anything from the community that lives with the existing system that it needs to be fixed and it's broken or anything like that. I know there was some issues here and there on different things, but not of throwing out the entire system. I think when we convey this back to the legislature, I think it's important that we make that note of that we're not hearing this from the license holders or the cabs.
Mr. Chairman, as somebody pointed out that the bill sponsor there's a personal agenda behind this bill, and that he has a long and sordid history of wildlife violations where he's been convicted of.
I can't recall that coming up in committee hearings. I know I have not brought that up.
I'll make sure some people know that, not from this commission, but from my own point of view. And going back to the law again, common sense tells you, a law enforcement officer, unless Tyler's a little different than the ones I worked with for 30 years, are not mind readers. And I've arrested hundreds of people. And I had quite a large percentage of this. I didn't mean to kill this person or sell these drugs or rob this store. It was unintentional on my part. It doesn't really wash. And I've heard people say that in wildlife violations. I didn't mean to fire my firearm and kill a cow elk when I was supposed to be shooting a bull elk. But that doesn't wash either. And I think that's kind of what logic they're trying to portray here. Your responsibility is to make sure that before you pull that trigger, you know that you're going to be firing at a bull elk, and a bull elk only. There's no excuse for non-intentional deviation from the law. And that's where I think it becomes unconstitutional. I just don't think this thing would fly past muster if given a lot of it's beyond, I can't believe it's gotten us to this point that that body, they're supposed to know better than that. Please point that out if you can.
Commissioner McInch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Commissioner Young, I think that's kind of the point, is that the people that are advocating for the bill are in positions to where they can get it to where it's at. They've shut down our process, which has involved cabs in the public, and certainly, there's been blockades put up, and so things can get filtered into this fashion. So, the bill has essentially become a dumping ground for all the nonsense that couldn't survive on its own or as part of another bill. And it's like the cumulative effect, it gained power somehow, it gained traction. When instead of a bill with one dumb idea in it, it's a bill with 10 dumb ideas, and it gains speed. And I don't think any of us are really going to process it other than somebody knows how to work the system, they're masterful at it, and they're leveraging things, and I believe that there's personal issues involved. And So how do we deal with it outside of coming, being adamantly opposed and talking with their own legislators and stuff? But there's not a lot to work with in this bill anymore. There's a lot of things that are just out of line, and you know, so back to what Commissioner Lane was saying, you know, do we take a position where we try to salvage some part of it to be part of the conversation, or do we just come out and say, this thing is so bad, you know, there's proposals to hold our feet to the fire to be responsive to the cabs, and yet the hypocrisy of it is that, you know, we're going to change the whole system without going through the cab process or a public process. And I find that very hypocritical. And you know, and I do think we need to come out opposed. Pretty much just how do you hit a moving target? You know, if it changes. And I think that at this point it's so late in the game that we just say, you know, anything having to do with the demerit system, anything having to do with you know, a bunch of these things that are in here, we're just opposed. It doesn't matter if it stays anywhere near what it's like now. We're opposed to it just because it's too late in the game, and we're not. There's games going on, and we're not part. We don't want to be part of that.
Further discussion? Commissioner Bliss.
I'd like to add, I mean, there's not a whole lot more I can say to add to the conversation that's been had. I agree with all the comments that have been made here, but speaking just as a average everyday sportsman, when I read this language, it disappoints me, it disheartens me. Our wildlife deserves the respect and that protection, and in some of these comments, I don't get that. And so I am adamantly opposed to any of these changes, just out of the respect for the wildlife that we have in the state.
Okay, additional comment? All right, I'll take a stab at this then. Go ahead. Commissioner Johnston.
I may be going a little too far, but I'll give it a shot. Hearing all the public comment that we've heard, I would move that this commission adopt a platform that opposes legislative efforts, including the legislative efforts of Assemblyman Ira Hansen through AB 142 or otherwise, to gut the current demerit system, take the demerit system away from the commission, soften penalties for wildlife crimes, and or to make enforcement of wildlife crimes more difficult.
I'll second that to start the conversation.
Commissioner McNish?
You're not going too far.
Additional discussion on the motion? Any discussion on any other aspects? Shed antlers, I know, is a big issue for some of the cabs. Would definitely hamstring us there. So I'd offer maybe a friendly amendment to, on your list enumerated, to add that we do not support limiting our ability to regulate shed antlers to commercial purposes only.
I'd accept that amendment. Thank you.
Is the second okay?
I will accept that, Chairman.
Any other discussion on the motion? Commissioner Lane?
But Mr. Chief, if you get into that, then you kind of open the door, it's going to force you to go into other specifics. Do you really want to do that, or do you want to make that broader statement that's already been proposed by Commissioner Johnson? I mean, I'm just concerned that if you start talking about specifics in the bill, then you kind of open yourself up to having to address each one of these issues, and I don't believe that you really want to do that.
Brad, can you repeat the original motion?
I move that the commission opposes the legislative efforts, including those of Assemblyman Ira Hansen through AB 142 or otherwise, to gut the current demerit system, to take the demerit system away from the commission, insert it into the Better Right statute, softens penalties for wildlife crimes, and or makes enforcement of wildlife crimes more difficult.
consider changing the word "got" to something different?
Sure.
Maybe a little wordsmithing
Absolutely.
with your legalese, lawyerly abilities. Change or eliminate the demerit system.
You know, I actually like the word gut because he's gutting it, but,
Hey, go with it.
if someone can give me a better word. I like, change I don't think is really the issue. I think if there was reasonable changes to the demerit system, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
I would say I think it's very appropriate for the subject matter.
I was thinking of eviscerate, but gut, well, let's go with that.
I would accept, I would change gut to eviscerate. I think that's even stronger, Commissioner Young, but let it be noted that that was your word, not mine.
Further discussion on the original motion?
I think the motion's a good motion. I'll support it.
Okay, any further discussion or question on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I believe unless there's any questions or comments, that would be it for agenda item number 9. Commissioner Johnson.
May I make a suggestion, that just given the time sensitive of this nature, we take a short break? Perhaps the chairman could convey what the vote just was to the chairman of the Natural Resources Assembly Committee. If it can be reached or that, I don't know. That might be worthwhile, maybe too late, I don't know, but I don't think it would hurt to pass the message along.
I can definitely check on that, if that's the flavor of the board. I'm ready for a break anyway. So let's do this. It's 30, and I don't mean 3:45. So we'll take a recess until 3:30 and we'll reconvene.